With March of the Lich King out, here are the best decks so far. First up is Triple Blood. Now, you might be surprised because it didn't seem like it was gonna be that great, but it turns out that Triple Blood has a ton of crazy tools. But the main thing we have to focus on here is Patchwork. Patchwork as a card seems to be one of the main win conditions you just have in the deck. Turns out when you go Brand into Patchwork, you can actually beat a ton of decks. Sire Denathrius is still really good because you obviously are still generating a ton of minions, giving you another late game finisher. Soul Stealer, of course, Twisting Nether on a stick. It's absolutely disgusting. And the deck has so much to discover that you're almost bound to find a form of removal or form of another win condition. Cards like Alexandros Morgraine can be used in a very slower matchup, but most of the time we'll probably not see a ton of play. A lot of people are probably very surprised at the fact that Triple Blood is very good, but it just ends up being a very good archetype when you could just kind of deal with a lot of the field, mainly because of Patchwork. Patchwork is a little bit too good of a card in my opinion. Cards like Blood Boil have been extremely good in order for you not to die, and I think overall Triple Blood will remain a very good deck as long as there's not a ton of combo decks. Another good deck has been Miracle Rogue with the Concoction package. I'm not gonna say this out loud, don't even ask. The main win conditions for this deck are using cards like Necrolord Draka or the Sinstone Graveyard and playing a bunch of other cards alongside it so you can get a big weapon or just a big stealthed minion. This deck can be very explosive, and because of the new concoctions, there's a ton of ways for you to generate more cards, deal 3 damage. You could just, kill up some of their minions while developing your own. This is a little bit of a harder deck to master. It is not something you're just gonna pick up and win a lot of games with. It is Miracle Rogue, so you need to understand when to take a risk and when to not. But once you get good with this deck, my God, it could just steal games from so many decks. I would highly recommend, by the way, when you do your mulligan for this deck, to go for the Sinstone Graveyard or Necrolord Draka, because if you just go for a bunch of minions or spells, sometimes it feels like your deck does absolutely nothing. You need to make sure you have a win condition. To no one's surprise, it turns out no minion Demon Hunter is actually really good. They added a new card called Soul Eater's Scythe, which basically consumes 3 different minions from your deck and makes them into a spell, which is really good against Patchwork, which we just saw. These souls are 1 mana, which means you can get your Zymax whenever you want, you can get your Jace whenever you want, and the 3rd minion in the deck is the Silver Moon Arcanist against a bunch of aggressive decks. It is a very good card with Unleash Fel because that is a ton of life gain and removal in the same turn. The main play pattern here though is to just defend yourself against early game minions to the point where you finally feel like you can actually get your really good Zymax or your really good Jace. There is also the ability to just win a game straight up with Kurtrus because he's so good in this deck. The combination of Kurtrus with Feldari Warband is absolutely bonkers, and it can just straight up win you a game sometimes with the upgraded hero power from Kurtrus. I think the main thing with this deck is understanding what your role is in each matchup. If you're going against a slower deck, you have to be the more aggressive one, and if you're going against a board-centric aggro deck, you have to be the one defending until you can finally swap tempo. I would highly recommend going for your Relic Vault and a bunch of your relics, but if you know you're going to go against an aggressive deck, make sure you keep some cards like Fel Barrage or Mark of the Scorn. This is a really cool deck. It's super fun to play, and if you love Demon Hunter, this is a great time to be a Demon Hunter main. To no one's surprise, Druid has also remained one of the best classes in the game. They were already very good before the expansion, and with the new armor package that they received, this has gone a little bit bonkers. This is because if you go Brand Bronzebeard with a Nubricon, you could basically do some disgusting combos, which I'm sure at some point you will see on ladder. It's also just really good because you have a ton of ramp to get to that consistently, and because Druid has so many ways to draw through their deck, and of course there's Guff. Druid is able to do an insane combo while making sure they consistently get life with their armor to finish off their opponent. And if that's not enough, you still run Sire Denathrius and Raid Boss Onyxia. This deck is absolutely insane, and the benefit of Druid right now is the ability to gain a ton of armor with Earthen Scales. If you use the combo of Insatiable Devourer with Earthen Scales, you can gain a ton of life, and often that's going to be just stopping your opponent from killing you if they're playing some kind of combo oriented deck. I mean, Druid just has the ability to do everything. It's going to be good until probably Wildheart Guff rotates at the end of this expansion. I can't wait. But what I will say is that someone hit rank 1 legend using a Celestial Alignment version of it. It just makes the Anubricon a little bit better because every minion is cheaper, therefore you don't burn as much armor when you combo it. I will put both in the description, but I'm really hoping they actually nerf Celestial Alignment to the point where it's just kind of unplayable. Turns out Triple Frost is really good at stalling the game out and enabling you to get to your late game control tools with Sire Denathrius, Mutinous, and the Frostwind's Fury. You also run Theotar to just take another win condition. Because you're not blood, you cannot run the Patchwork, but it is still a very powerful archetype. It can freeze boards consistently, and of course, you have ways to copy your already really powerful Frost spells. Now, Now you can go for the more combo oriented route if you want, but a lot of people have been having great success at high legend just with 40 cards in their deck and just freezing your opponent's board over and over again. The main winning condition here obviously is playing a little bit control. If you feel like you're going to go against a slower archetype, you can feel free to go for a more damage oriented route and try to find ways to burn out your opponent. This is a very fun deck if you like freeze mage. So if you like playing this type of decks, make sure you definitely try out Triple Frost. Oddly enough, Arcane Hunter has also been a very powerful deck because of the card Shock Spitter. The main win condition here is just using all your weapons and hitting consistently until your Shock Spitter does a ton of damage, and then you have the ability to play Bran with your Shock Spitters to absolutely roll your opponent. Eventually I'll get to the point where your Shock Spitters do around 9 to 10 damage, and with Bran with 2 of those, it's just lethal against the majority of the decks. It's very powerful, and you'll also be doing damage throughout the entire game, so you don't even need to get them that high up. It's also a really easy deck to play for the most part. You play for board, you generate some Shock Spitters, you play for the board again, you make your spells in your hand do more damage. Conjured Arrow is a very powerful effect. I'm very surprised they printed this card, but the entire deck works out phenomenally. This is also a much more fun Hunter deck than the average one, and if you haven't really tried Hunter, this is a pretty cheap deck overall. Even though Curse Warlock really didn't get anything new, it is still a very powerful deck in this metagame because a lot of people are trying brand new stuff. So if you feel like ruining their day, you could play Curses, but don't be that guy unless you really want to get Legend. It's pretty good if you want to get Legend. There's also Aggro Druid, which got a very powerful card with Lingering Zombie. It just makes the entire archetype a little bit more consistent and a little bit more annoying to clear all their minions. So if you feel like aggroing your opponent down, this is probably a pretty great deck for you. This isn't a super fun deck, obviously, and there's a brand new expansion to explore a bunch of other stuff, but some people just like Aggro Druid. There's also a very surprising Dragon Paladin that is actually doing very well. The ability to play Cariel in any Paladin deck just makes it better, but the main win condition here is the Kazakusan. Because you fight for the board pretty aggressively with a ton of early game dragons and minions, your ability to just slam Kazakusan is pretty likely, and it gives you a win condition against these very slow decks. This is a very good deck against Blood Death Knight. The reason is because you have the ability to discover more Kazakusans, which gives you another out, but often the treasures from Kazakusan are just going to be enough to win you the game. I think overall, if you're looking for a slower Paladin deck, this one is probably really great. Last deck in this video will be the Priest deck that I've been seeing around. This is probably the worst one on this list, but as it gets refined, it might become a lot better. The ability to just play a bunch of Death Rattle minions and then keep resummoning them is pretty troublesome for some decks. And then of course you're still playing Sire Denathrius. If you are looking for a priest deck, this might be the one for you. I'm not sure if it's worth crafting yet. If you have any other cool decks, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.